Hi guys, Phil McGilvray here from Grandma's Jars. Thanks for joining us today. Today's tutorial is the second in our 10-part series, our top 10 tips for paying off debt. In our previous session, we looked at tip number 1, which was no more debt. So coming to that place where we're committed to not taking on any more debt is super important if we're to move forward financially and actually get ourselves out of debt. So to start moving in the right direction, we need to stop digging that hole. Today, what we're looking at is the habits and behaviours that have caused us to be in debt in the first place. So going through a process to actually look at, well, what's caused us to be in this situation to start with. So what we've got here is the process that we take all our clients through. So whenever we take on a new budgeting client that has got debt, we sit down and we look at, okay, what are the little habits and behaviours that along the way have caused you to be in debt? I've got here a list of different habits and behaviours as an example. We've got our mock client, if you like, Fred, who has gone through and said, well, look, these are the habits and behaviours that are holding me back, that have caused me to be in debt. And then we've sat down with Fred and we've sort of brainstormed some solutions to those problems, those issues that have caused him to be where he is today. And this is a really important process to go through when you're really looking at trying to turn things around. Now, in this instance, I'm going to take you through this process as I would a client. Important to know that you may not have these issues here, these habits and behaviours that are holding Fred back might not be your habits and behaviours. But what I want you to do is get an idea of the process that we encourage people to go through, and that certainly we take all our clients through. So what I'm going to do is go through them step by step, something that I'd encourage you to do. I have no doubt that some of these issues are issues for most people and probably for you as well, because these are the issues that I would say that 90% of our clients that come to us in debt have actually got. But as I said, it's not about the specific issues, it's about the process. Okay, so starting now, if we're looking at the habits and behaviours on the left-hand side here, you can see the first one that Fred's told us that he's got is he shops on an ad hoc basis, which means that he'll finish up work for the day. On his way home, he'll go via the supermarket and he'll wander around until he finds something he wants to eat. His intention is to spend $20, but unfortunately he ends up spending $50 just because he's hungry and because he's not planned, and he'll come out with a few extra nibbles and so on. So what we've said to Fred here is, look, mate, you need to change the way you're working. You need to change that. So we've suggested planning your meal. Now, we're really big at Grandma's Jars on planning a meal because this is an area where, clients can spend as little as, $100 a week through to $300-400 a week. It really comes back to planning. And so what we did was we sat down with Fred, we looked at all his favourite meals, listed about 30 or 40 different favourite meals, and then each week he sits down and pulls, 4 or 5 of them, puts them into a list, creates himself a shopping list, and then shops with purpose. And the ideal being is you only go to the grocery store maybe twice a week, once for your main shop and twice just to top up with milk, fresh bread, fresh fruit and vegetables. So what we did was we sat down with Fred and just helped him to get into the habit of meal planning. Now on our website we have meal planning worksheets. If you're after something like that, you can certainly get them there. The second thing that we went through and Fred told us was, look, I spend a lot of money on bought coffees and lunches. It sort of snuck up on me a bit. He said, I don't plan to spend that much, but because these little rituals on a daily basis, going to work via the local cafe to get a bought coffee and then going out to the cafe again to buy my lunch, those sorts of expenses have become part of my lifestyle, and as a result I'm spending far more money than I ever thought I would. So we said to Fred, look, don't cut it out altogether. Now, me personally, I don't get coffee, I don't drink coffee, but I do eat chocolate, and I know what it's like to have a bit of a pick-me-up at 2:30, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So we're not saying to Fred, look, get rid of it. What we're saying is give yourself an allowance. Identify how much, firstly, you can afford, and secondly, how much you think is reasonable to spend on these sorts of things, and give yourself allowance, and then plan your week around having just that amount of money. And when that money runs out, bad luck. You've got to bring a sandwich from home, and instant coffee's going to be the way until you get your next week's allowance. The second thing, and this is the third thing, and this is a really big one, is that most people don't have cash savings these days. If you've got a home, a lot of people tend to use their redraw facilities or money they've paid off their mortgage as their cash reserve. And this is a really bad way to go, because it means you can easily access the equity in your home. And the problem is, once you've done it once or twice or 3 times, and maybe for legitimate emergencies, it just becomes easier and easier and easier every time you're a bit short of money to dip back into your redraw facility. Now, what I'd suggest to Fred is you definitely need to have your cash reserve completely separate from your mortgage. Have it in ideally an offset account. If you're not sure what an offset account is, again, have a look at our website. We've got articles there on the best bank account structure for you. But an offset account is pretty much an account where any money you've got in that account is considered off the mortgage from an interest perspective, but it's actually a completely separate account, not a big slush fund that's all the capital you've paid off your home loan over time. So we'd actually set Fred up with a cash reserve, and we always say start with a rainy day fund of 3 to 5 grand. That covers most expenses, most emergencies, the car blowing up, the fridge dying, and so on. And then the rest, or over time, you should try and build that further. But that's a good starting point. But not a redraw facility, and certainly have a real cash reserve, not just access to more debt via your redraw facility or line of credit. The fourth thing is, Fred said to us that he shops using his bank account balance as his guide for can I afford it or can't I. Now, the problem with this is your bank account balance doesn't know when your expenses are coming up. It doesn't tell you, hey, your car registration is due tomorrow. It doesn't tell you when your electricity is due. It doesn't tell you when your rates are due. And all these big expenses will creep up on you. And if you're always just spending the money you've got in your bank account, when they turn up, the funds aren't there, and you go, well, what do I do now? I'll have to put it on the credit card. And then that credit card gets harder and harder to pay off. So you should never use your bank account balance, as Fred does, to determine, can I afford to spend? You really need to look at having a budget. The budget knows what expense you've got coming up. It will tell you what you can afford to spend, what's really spare, and what's needed for upcoming expenses. The last thing that Fred said to us was, and it's very, very particular, or it's very typical, should I say, for people in their 20s, 30s, and even early 40s, where they say, well, we've always borrowed. That's just the way we do things. Anytime we've needed money, we just borrow. If we need to buy a car, if we need to replace the furniture, we've just borrowed. And unfortunately, Fred's probably quite right. For the people in Gen Y particularly and younger, borrowing money is just part of our culture, but it's not a healthy part of our culture. And one of the things I said to Fred is, you've got to say no. You've got to say, look, I don't want to be like everyone else, because everyone else is broke. They have the nice cars, they have the nice house, they have the nice furniture, but underneath the water, they're swimming double time to try and keep their head afloat and keep themselves from going backwards because of their debt. And one of the favourite sayings that we've got over here is, just because it is does not mean it should be or has to be. So when I work with clients, it's very much about changing our mindset to say, just because you've always borrowed doesn't mean you have to keep borrowing. Okay, now, hopefully that's given you an idea of the process that we go through with Fred and with all our clients. Is you need to sit down, you need to identify your habits and behaviours, and it's not just about saying, well, let's get rid of these. What we want to do is replace these with really positive habits that can really give us some momentum going forward. So look, that's step number 2. That's tip number 2. I hope that's made sense. As I said, it's about the process. You can get these worksheets off our website, or else you can just draw up a piece of paper, habits, behaviours, and then the other slide, solutions, and really sit down and work out, okay, what are those little habits that we can change for the better that will have a huge difference in our future.